You know, when you think of ancient Greece, your mind probably jumps to Athens, Sparta, maybe the Parthenon, right? But what if I told you that's actually the sequel? Today, we're diving into the prequel, the mysterious, powerful, and kind of weird civilizations that laid the groundwork for everything we know.
So what if modern art, with its clean lines and minimalist vibe, wasn't invented in the 20th century? What if it was actually invented 5,000 years ago by a mysterious island people? And get this, what if Europe's first great civilization built a palace with over 1,000 rooms, complete with indoor plumbing, but had absolutely zero defensive walls?
So yeah, forget what you think you know. Today, we are exploring the true, secret origins of Greece, the baffling art of the Cyclades, the real-life labyrinth of the Minotaur, and a fortress so massive, people were convinced it was built by giants.
All right, first up, let's dig into our first mystery, an impossible piece of artwork from a culture that just shouldn't have existed this way. Let's just get our bearings for a second. We're talking about a time way before classical Athens. The Cycladic culture shows up around 3200 BC. That's centuries before the Great Pyramid of Giza was even finished. We're going way back.
And this is what they made. Take a look. These are the marble idols. I mean, just look at them. They're so sleek, so minimalist, and just stunningly abstract. You would absolutely be forgiven for thinking they belong in a modern art gallery, but these were carved thousands and thousands of years ago.
So the big question is, how? How did a Bronze Age culture, working with pretty simple tools, develop an artistic vision that is so sophisticated and so weirdly modern? It's a puzzle that still has archaeologists scratching their heads.
Okay, on to our next mystery. We're heading south to the island of Crete, home to a civilization that built a legendary palace and, maybe most remarkably, lived in a world without walls.
Welcome to the Palace of Knossos. And listen, this wasn't just a building. It was a sprawling, multi-story city complex with an estimated 1,300 rooms. It was so confusing, so vast, that people are pretty sure this is the origin of the myth of the labyrinth, the maze that supposedly held the monstrous Minotaur.
And this place was incredible. They had advanced sewage and drainage systems, I'm talking terracotta pipes, and maybe even flushing toilets. They had these unique columns that were actually wider at the top than the bottom, and the walls were covered in vibrant art celebrating nature. But the most shocking feature is what's missing. There were no defensive walls. None. At all.
And that tells you pretty much everything about their culture. The Minoans were, by all accounts, a peaceful civilization. Their power came from trade, not from war. They were focused on creating beautiful art, living in harmony with nature, and enjoying luxury. A Bronze Age utopia? Maybe.
Well, every utopia seems to have its opposite. So forget the open palaces and the peaceful art for a minute. Now, meet the warriors.
This is the work of the Mycenaeans, from mainland Greece. Their building style was called Cyclopean Masonry. Why? Because the limestone boulders they used were so gigantic that later Greeks just couldn't believe mere mortals had moved them. They figured it had to be the work of the Cyclops, the one-eyed giants from the myths.
And the contrast could not be more stark. You have the Minoans with their open palaces and art filled with leaping dolphins and flowers. And then you have the Mycenaeans with their heavily fortified citadels surrounded by immense walls of stone. Their art wasn't about nature. It was about the hunt, the chariot race, the glory of battle. The Minoans were traders. The Mycenaeans were conquerors.
And they built to impress, even in death. This is the so-called Treasury of Atreus. Thing is, it wasn't a treasury at all, but a monumental tomb for a king built right into the side of a hill with this absolutely colossal beehive-shaped dome inside.
So just how colossal are we talking? Well, the dome inside stands over 13 meters high. To put that in perspective for you, it remained the largest unsupported dome in the entire world for over 1,000 years. It was an engineering marvel that wouldn't be beaten until the Romans built the Pantheon. Their power was backed by incredible wealth, most likely ripped from conquest. This is the famous Mask of Agamemnon, a funeral mask hammered from a single sheet of pure gold. This isn't just an artifact, it's a statement. It's a death mask for a warrior king, a permanent symbol of the riches and the royal power these warlords had.
So, what we have here are two powerful competing visions for civilization. You have the peaceful artists, and you have the mighty warriors.
but only one of them would survive. And that leads us to our final unsolved case.
So let's just lay out the evidence one last time. You've got the Minoans, peaceful, artistic, centered at Knossos. Their fate? They vanished. Then you've got the Mycenaeans, warlike, fortified, based at Mycenae. Their fate? Well, they eventually took over Crete and dominated the entire region.
And here's why this all matters so much. These ruins, these stories, they are not just footnotes to Greek history. They are the foundation. The world of Homer, of Achilles and Agamemnon, that was the world of the Mycenaeans. The great legends of classical Greece were born from the memory and the rubble of these even older civilizations.
Which leaves us with the final, haunting question. The peaceful, advanced, artistic Minoans disappeared. The warlike, fortified Mycenaeans took their place. Why? Was it a natural disaster? A conquest? Or something else entirely? The clues are there, but the case remains very much open.